Welcome. If you are here, it is because something inside you has already whispered a question that others may not hear. I invite you to sit as if this room itself were a dream, and we were all guests within it, moving carefully, as though we had entered a forest where every tree is listening. The title before us, The Danger of Seeing What Others Don't, is not a thesis, but a living question. It rises between us like a candle flame, fragile, luminous, casting long shadows on the walls of our minds. And just as in a dream, we will not demand answers too quickly. We will let the image breathe, and we will listen for its voice. What does it mean to see what others do not? Is it a gift, or is it a burden? Perhaps both. In every age, there are individuals whose vision cuts through the veil of appearances. They glimpse the skeleton beneath the skin, the hidden river beneath the field. Yet, to see differently is to risk isolation. The community is bound together by shared images, by a common horizon of what is considered real. When one person perceives beyond that horizon, he or she becomes a stranger. Wanderer in exile, this is the tension. To be awake to what others do not see is to carry both illumination and loneliness. But is it not true that the shadow of loneliness is cast by the very light of vision? Imagine a village in which one child can hear the faint song of a bird that no one else believes exists. The others mock or dismiss, and soon the child wonders, am I insane, or am I entrusted with a secret? The archetype of the seer always hovers near madness, because society does not easily forgive those who bring visions that shatter its peace. And yet, without the seer, the community stagnates, sealed in its blindness. We stand between two dangers: the danger of not seeing and the danger of seeing too much. The persona, the mask we wear to live among others, tends to shield us from this second danger. The persona says, smile, nod, agree, do not reveal what stirs beneath. But the shadow, that dark twin of our ego, waits behind the mask and insists that the unseen must be honored. To deny it is to lose vitality. To reveal it too bluntly is to risk rejection. What then is the path? To hold the tension without collapsing it. To see, and yet not demand others to see as we do.
But Dr. Jung, what do you mean by seeing? Are you talking about hallucinations? Or just unusual ideas? How can a person tell the difference between a vision that's meaningful and a fantasy that's dangerous?
A good and necessary question. By seeing, I do not mean hallucinations in the pathological sense, though even those are not without significance. I mean perceiving images, intuitions, or symbolic constellations that are not yet acknowledged by the conscious collective. It may come as a dream, a sudden image, an unexplainable intuition that feels more real than fact. How do we distinguish between vision and delusion? The test is not logic alone, it is the resonance in the body, the way the image endures over time, the fruit it bears in life. A true vision does not inflate the ego, but humbles it. It carries both fascination and wait, as though it belongs not only to you but to something larger, fantasy puffs up the self, vision bends it. Consider the prophets of old. They were not congratulated for their sight, but stoned or exiled. If one were merely fantasizing, society might laugh, but it would not feel threatened. When a vision touches archetypal truth, the community trembles because the collective shadow is exposed. Thus, to see what others do not is often to feel the hostility of those who cannot yet bear that sight. The question is not merely, do I see truly, but also, can I carry what I see without arrogance, without despair, without demanding others to accept it?
Last night I dreamed I was standing at the edge of a great lake. The water was black, but the sky was full of stars reflected upon it. So, it looked like a mirror of the heavens. I wanted to step in, but when I touched the water, I saw faces rising from beneath, pale and silent, as though waiting for me. I felt both drawn and terrified. Then I woke up.
Thank you, Mira. That is a beautiful and haunting image. Let us honor it without rushing to explanation. The lake is the unconscious, dark, unfathomable, yet reflecting the infinite cosmos above. To stand at its edge is to stand on the border between ego and the depth of the psyche. The faces beneath these are your shadow figures, long submerged, perhaps ancestors of your own psyche, forgotten memories, unlived possibilities. They do not speak, but their silence is eloquent. They are waiting to be acknowledged. The terror you felt is not a sign of danger alone, but of the sacred weight of the encounter. The dream warns against literalism. Do not think you must plunge recklessly into the lake. To honor the image is enough. Hold it, paint it, let it accompany you. It is not demanding action, but attention. Dreams are autonomous. They are like strangers who visit us with gifts wrapped in mystery. We must not tear the wrapping apart, but unfold it with reverence. If you let this dream live in you, it will slowly reveal its truth. It may point to your anima, the inner feminine who mediates between ego and self. It may point to shadow content you fear to face, but above all, it reminds you that the unconscious is not empty but filled with life, waiting for encounter. To avoid such encounters is costly. When we turn away from the shadow, we become hollow. We project what we cannot face onto others. Seeing in them the evil or weakness we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves, this projection destroys relationships, poison community, and leaves the individual estranged from his own soul. To face the shadow is painful. Yes, but it is the price of becoming whole. It is like carrying a torch into a cave where bats scatter and bones are strewn. But at the center, one finds a hidden spring of living water. This is the luminous metaphor I wish you to carry. The spring in the cave, you will encounter it again.
So are you saying that if someone feels persecuted at work or misunderstood by their partner, it could just be their shadow projected? That seems unfair. Isn't it possible that people really are against them?
Of course, projection does not mean that others are innocent angels. The world has cruelty enough, But the psychological task is to discern what belongs to me and what belongs to the other. The danger of seeing what others do not is precisely this. We may confuse our inner vision with external reality. If I see betrayal everywhere, I must ask, is betrayal in the world? Or is it a ghost rising from my own past, from a wound never faced? The touchstone I offer is this. Whenever you feel certain the darkness is only outside you, pause and turn the gaze inward as well. The enemy may be real, but your shadow will always use the enemy's face to speak. Let us try an inner exercise now. Keep your eyes open. Let your breath settle. Slow but natural. Feel the weight of your body in the chair. Notice your hands, the way they rest, the warmth of your skin. Now, without forcing, let an image arise in your mind of something you fear but cannot name. Do not search, simply wait. If no image comes, notice the silence itself. Now, gently imagine placing a candle beside this image or this silence. You do not chase it. You do not interrogate it. You only allow a soft light to accompany it. Stay here for a few breaths, and now return.
I feel a heaviness. It's as if the candle only showed me how large the darkness is. Part of me wants to blow it out and walk away. Another part feels sorrow. Like I have abandoned someone inside myself for a long time.
Yes, Mira, that is the grief of the soul when it realizes it has neglected its own children. The figures in the dream, the heaviness in the chest, these are not enemies, but orphans of your psyche. To welcome them does not mean to let them rule. Compassion with boundaries. This is the art. You bow to them. You say, I see you, but you remain the host, not the captive. Individuation does not dissolve relationship, it purifies it. By knowing the shadow within, you are less likely to bind others with its chains. Notice, all of you, what has just happened in this room. Mira's words, her grief emerged just as I spoke of the shadow, and at that same moment I felt the lights above us flicker for an instant. Did you notice? A small coincidence? Perhaps, yet such coincidences are the language of synchronicity. They remind us that psyche and world are woven together, not as cause and effect, but as pattern and meaning. To see what others do not is also to see these correspondences. They are not predictions, not superstitions, but intimations that we are inside a living cosmos.
Then how do we live with this awareness without going mad? If I see symbols everywhere, how do I avoid drowning in them?
Let me tell you a parable. There was once a traveler who carried a lantern into a labyrinth. At first, every shadow seemed a monster, every flicker a threat. He was tempted to smash the lantern so he might no longer see. But as he walked, he noticed that the lantern not only revealed monsters, it also revealed the path. He realized the labyrinth itself was alive, guiding him by what it showed and what it hid. To see is dangerous, yes, but to extinguish the lantern is worse. The gift is not in seeing everything, but in learning which images belong to the path of the soul. The danger of seeing what others do not is that we mistake ourselves for gods. Or we despair of being outcasts. But the true work is neither inflation nor despair. It is integration, the shadow, the anima, the self. All these are movements of psyche toward wholeness. When you carry the spring in the cave within you, the water is no longer hidden. It becomes a stream that flows into your relationships, your work, your prayers. The cave is no longer feared, for it has become the source. Carl Jung. Do you feel how the parable still lingers in the air? The traveler with the lantern remains among us. That is how psyche works. It plants an image, and the image becomes a companion. We are not asked to solve it, but to walk beside it until it ripens into meaning. The danger of seeing what others do not is that one may mistake oneself for the only traveler, alone with a fragile light. But there are always other lanterns, sometimes invisible, sometimes hidden in the very people who appear indifferent. Even the skeptic who laughs at visions may be carrying an unopened lantern within. The psyche does not play by the rules of daylight reason. It moves in patterns, in echoes, in correspondences. To demand that everything be verified by the measures of the rational mind is to banish the gods to the underworld, where they grow angry, and when the gods are angry, they return as symptoms. The unacknowledged archetype will reappear as compulsion, as neurosis, as an inexplicable fear in the middle of the night. This is why I say to you, better to greet the gods in symbolic form, in dream, in art, in ritual, than to suffer them as afflictions.
But isn't that dangerous too? I mean, what if someone takes their dreams too seriously? Or believes every coincidence is a sign from heaven? That seems like a fast road to delusion.
Yes, that is the danger on the other side. To inflate the ego with visions is to fall into madness. This is why balance is everything. Dreams must be honored, but not worshipped. Synchronicities must be noticed, but not exploited. The middle way is humility. To say, this image belongs to me, but it also surpasses me. I will not dismiss it, and I will not claim to own it. That is the attitude of the true seeker. Remember, the unconscious is like a vast orchestra. The ego hears only its own instrument, perhaps the violin, but sometimes, through dream or vision, we catch a phrase from the horns, or a whisper from the flutes. To believe the violin is all, is ignorance. To believe one phrase is the entire symphony is arrogance. The task is to remain a listener, allowing the larger music to resound.
When you speak of the orchestra, I remember another dream. I was in a cathedral, enormous and echoing. But there was no altar. No crucifix, only an organ playing itself. No one sat at the keys. Yet the music filled the air. I felt both terrified and at peace, as if something immense were watching me through the sound.
A profound image, Mira. The cathedral is the structure of the psyche itself, vast and sacred. The absent altar suggests that the traditional symbols of your faith may no longer suffice. The God image is shifting, but the organ playing itself, that is the self is the wholeness that transcends the ego, the center beyond our conscious center. It plays the music, whether you are present or not. You are invited to listen, to respond, but you are not the composer. To feel terror and peace at once is exactly right, for the encounter with the self is numinous. It overwhelms with grandeur, yet it consoles with belonging. Do you see how your dream joins with the parable of the lantern and the cave spring metaphor from earlier? The unconscious continues the dialogue through many mouths. It is not random, it is a conversation. The danger of seeing what others do not is to think the images belong to you alone, when in fact they belong to the collective, to the archetypal field that sustains us all.
Still, when I hear this, I think about daily life. Say someone is betrayed in marriage, or loses a job, or suffers injustice. How can they think in terms of archetypes and self when their life feels like it's collapsing?
That is where psychology must remain rooted in the real. Archetypes are not abstractions floating above life. They are embodied in every crisis. Betrayal evokes the archetype of the wound, the shadow of trust. Loss of work evokes the death of persona, the collapse of the mask we wear. Injustice evokes the trickster, the adversary that throws us into chaos. To speak of archetypes is not to deny suffering, but to name its deeper shape. And when suffering has a shape, it is no longer meaningless. Let me give you another touchstone. What happens to us is never only personal. It is also mythic. When you are betrayed, you are not alone. You stand with Joseph, sold by his brothers, with Christ abandoned by his disciples, with Psyche deserted by Eros. To see what others do not is to glimpse the myth living in your pain. That vision does not erase the grief, but it grants dignity. I invite you now into another brief practice. Again, keep your eyes open. Breathe. Feel your chest rise and fall. Now, recall a moment when you felt wronged, misunderstood, or cast out. Do not dwell on the details. Just let the feeling emerge. Now imagine behind the scene a figure from myth or story who has also known such rejection. Let them stand beside you. Do not speak. Do not ask. Only stand together. Feel the weight shift from I alone to we together. Hold this for a few moments and return.
I felt Antigone standing with me. It brought tears, because she too was condemned for honoring what others did not see. It felt like she placed her hand on my shoulder, and suddenly my pain was less lonely.
Yes, that is the power of symbolic imagination. It heals not by denying reality, but by enlarging it. The personal wound becomes a doorway into the collective soul. Antigone appears not as fantasy, but as archetypal companion. And in her presence, you are reminded that your grief is part of a vast story that belongs to humanity. This does not remove responsibility from the concrete world. You must still act, speak, perhaps struggle, but you act now with an ally, with a witness. And that changes everything. It is in such moments that synchronicity often occurs. You think of Antigone, and tomorrow you may stumble upon her name in a book or hear it mentioned on the radio. These coincidences are not trivial. They are confirmations that psyche and world are woven by the same loom. They remind us that the danger of seeing what others do not is balanced by the grace of being accompanied by the invisible.
But what if someone doesn't want to see at all? What if they fear the darkness so much that they keep the lantern unlit their whole life?
Then the shadow rules them unconsciously. To refuse sight does not eliminate danger, it multiplies it. One who will not face their own aggression will project it endlessly onto neighbors, nations, strangers. One who will not face their own desire will chase substitutes without end. To not see is also perilous. That is why I speak of individuation as the middle way. Not to see everything, not to claim omniscience, but to see enough of one's own darkness that it no longer tyrannizes from below. Let me offer a myth of my own, one not from tradition, but rising as I speak. There was a woman who lived in a house with no windows. She told herself she was safe, for no light could enter, no danger could be seen. But in the night, she heard scratching at the walls. She grew afraid and built the walls thicker. The scratching grew louder. One day, a crack opened, and through it, a beam of light entered. She wept, for in the light, she saw the faces of those she had loved and lost, pressed against the wall, waiting. The danger was not outside, but inside. In her refusal to see, that is the danger we speak of. To see is perilous, but not to see is deadly. The task of life is to cultivate vision without arrogance, humility without blindness.
It feels overwhelming, though, to carry both terror and light, to live in the tension. Sometimes I wish I could return to ignorance.
That is honest, mirror, and very human. The wish to return is the longing for paradise, the womb, the garden before knowledge. But individuation is not a return, it is a passage. To grow is to leave the garden, to taste the fruit, to wander the wilderness, and to discover that the self is not lost, but waiting on the far side. I say to you, you cannot unknow what you have seen, but you can transform the seeing into wisdom. The burden becomes a gift when carried consciously. And remember our earlier metaphor, the spring in the cave. At first, you saw only bats and bones. Now, you know that within the darkness flows water that sustains life. The cave has not changed. You have. This is the mystery of transformation. The danger of seeing what others do not becomes the blessing of drinking from a hidden spring. Jung. The danger of seeing what others do not is never a question of intellect alone. It is a question of soul, for the intellect can catalog, analyze, dismiss, but the soul feels the wound of difference, the solitude of vision. To see differently is to be estranged, yet estrangement is often the very crucible in which the self is born. Do not think you can bypass this loneliness. The path of individuation is walked in company with symbols, not always with companions. When Christ was crucified, he cried, "Why have you forsaken me?" That cry belongs not only to him, but to the archetypal human who sees beyond the crowd. The danger is not only persecution, but also abandonment, the sense that no one understands. But this cry is not the end. It is the threshold. Beyond it lies the deeper truth. the self, is not absent, but hidden. It watches from the depths, waiting until the ego has relinquished its demand for approval.
So, are you saying that suffering is necessary for vision? That seems cruel. Why can't the psyche reveal itself without so much pain?
Pain is not the only teacher, but it is the most persuasive. Think of birth. The child does not arrive without travail. The tearing of the veil between conscious and unconscious is painful because it disrupts the structures that gave us safety. The persona resists, the collective resists, even our own ego resists. So the vision comes clothed in suffering to compel us to pay attention. Without the wound, we would dismiss the whisper. With the wound, we are forced to listen. But I must add, suffering alone is not redemptive. It can destroy as well as transform. What matters is whether suffering is given symbolic form. If I suffer blindly, I am crushed. If I suffer as Antigone suffered, or as Christ suffered, or as Psyche suffered, then my suffering belongs to a larger pattern and I can endure. This is why myth, dream, and symbol are essential. They give suffering its proper context, preventing despair.
I feel that in my own life. My grief used to feel like a private curse. But since my dreams began to speak, I sense that it is part of a wider current. Still, I resist. Part of me wants to cling to the ordinary, to be like everyone else.
That is precisely the tension. Individuation is not escape from the ordinary but transformation of it. To be like everyone else is the function of persona. It allows you to live in society, but to be only persona is to be hollow. The images that come to you are not given to isolate you, but to deepen your humanity. When you live them consciously, you are more, not less, connected. Let us return to the luminous metaphor of the spring in the cave. In the beginning, it is hidden, guarded by beds and bones. Later, you find the water and drink, but finally, the task is to bring that water back to the village. If you keep it for yourself, it stagnates. If you share it arrogantly, the village rejects you. But if you carry it humbly, letting others taste without forcing, then the spring fulfills its purpose. That is how the danger becomes the blessing.
And how do we know when it is time to share? Many people speak of visions, but they sound self-important, or even manipulative.
You know, it is time to share when the vision ceases to inflate you and begins to humble you. When it no longer says, I am special, but says, I am responsible. The true vision compels service, not display. It seeks to heal, not to dominate. And you will know by the fruit. Does it nourish relationship? Does it deepen compassion? Does it respect the freedom of others? If so, it is time. Here, let us pause again. Close your eyes for a moment if you wish, or leave them open softly. Bring to mind an image that has lingered with you, a dream, a memory, a symbol. Do not analyze, simply hold it. Now, ask it silently. What do you need from me? Wait. Notice what arises, not words, perhaps, but a feeling, a gesture, a shift in breath. Trust that answer. And now, slowly, return.
Mind said. Do not rush me. I felt almost scolded. But also relieved. As if the image wants to move at its own pace. Not mine.
That is wisdom. The unconscious has its tempo. To demand premature clarity is to violate its autonomy. To respect its timing is to honor its reality. The image will ripen like fruit. To pluck it too early is to eat bitterness. Friends, we are close to the heart of the matter. The danger of seeing what others do not is not simply the loneliness of difference or the risk of delusion. It is the temptation to force, either to force ourselves to forget or to force others to accept. Both are errors. The middle way is patience, to live with the image until it shows its truth, and to share it when it becomes a gift, not a weapon.
And what about faith? Many people come from traditions where visions and dreams are either exalted as revelations or condemned as deceptions. How can one navigate that?
Faith and psychology need not be enemies. Religion at its best offers symbolic containers for the mystery of psyche. At its worst, it either idolizes or represses it. The individual must discern, does my tradition help me hold the image with reverence, or does it force me to deny or absolutize it? The self is not bound by dogma, yet it often speaks through religious forms. What matters is not whether the symbol is approved, but whether it deepens the connection to the living God within. I would give you one last parable tonight. A man stood at the edge of a forest where others saw only trees, but he saw among the trunks a figure moving with light in its hands. He called out, but no one else saw it. He doubted himself, grew afraid. At last he entered the forest. Following the figure, days passed. He returned, carrying a branch that burned without consuming itself. The villagers mocked until one by one they touched the fire and found it warmed but did not burn. Then they understood. The danger of seeing what others do not is the risk of madness. Yes, but the gift is to bring back a fire that sustains life. So I say to you, do not despise your visions, nor worship them. Walk with them as companions. Let them test you, humble you, transform you, and when the time is ripe, carry their flame with gentleness into the world.